Cameron, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, can you give myself an audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Sure, I'll try to wrap it up in a really short nutshell because it's kind of long, but I've been a personal finance journalist for more than 20 years, written for a variety of publications, including Kiplinger's and Forbes. And in 2008, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She was 65, I was 35, still had young kids, very young kids at home, and I had to become her caregiver.
Hmm.
And she lived with Alzheimer's disease for 12, nearly 13 years. And that experience prompted me to write a book that came out in 2019 called Mom and Dad, We Need to Talk: How to Have Essential Conversations with Your Parents About Their Finances. Because I did not have essential conversations with my mom about her finances before she started experiencing memory loss. And I had to scramble, I had to play detective. And I want people to realize that they need to have these conversations sooner rather than later. I want people to realize these conversations are not nearly as scary as you might think they are. And so that's my story in a nutshell.
Awesome. So, let's talk about kind of a little bit about what are the things that we have to be careful of with our parents in terms of scams and frauds. How do we talk to them? How do we prep for those situations? And how can we hopefully uh, make those kind of transitions of them being less of us taking more responsibility for their finances and them less responsibility?
Sure. So I think actually talking to your parents about scams is an easy way to open the door to more conversations about their finances because we all are targets of scammers, right? I mean, it's not that obviously they are targeting older adults because they see them as easy prey, but you and I are getting calls. People in their 20s are getting calls. Scammers go after everyone. And so it's an easy way to start the conversation by saying, "Hey, I got a call the other day from someone claiming to be with the IRS. They said that I owe back taxes if I don't pay right away. Go get a gift card at Target and give them the number. Then they're going to send a police officer to come arrest me." Or, maybe you got a phishing email, or maybe you got a text messages. Oh my gosh, the text messages. I get them all the time now. AT&T is telling me that, I can click, I paid my bill on time, so click to get a special gift.
Yeah.
Or Amazon is telling me that my account is being suspended. So you've got an example about a scam. You have to have one. I know you do because we all do. And so you go to your parents and you say, "Hey, I got this text message. Did you get something like this?" Or, "Hey, I just got this email." Or, "Hey, I just got a phone call and I wanted you to be aware of it. And I want you to know it's a scam." And then you can start talking about those other scam red flags, like the request to use a gift card to make a payment, the request to wire a money. No legitimate organization is going to ask you to wire money. It's not going to ask you to go to Target to get a gift card. The IRS is not going to tell you to go to Target to get a gift card to pay your tax bill. It's just not going to happen. And also, the IRS is not going to call you. Government agencies typically will not call you. They communicate by mail, and they're not going to call unless there's already a conversation that's been going on. There's been a back and forth between you and Medicare, you and the Social Security Administration. They're not going to call out of the blue asking for personal information or a payment. Let your parents know this. Let them know if you ever get an email, even if it looks like that email is coming from a bank or some company that you've done business with, and it's telling you to click on a link, don't click on the link. Call your bank directly and say, "Hey, I just got this email. Is there a problem with my account?" Same goes for text messages. Don't click on links in text messages. Again, reach out to the company directly and see if there's an issue. Warn your parents about these red flags because there's no way you can keep them up to date with every new scam
Yeah.
that's out there. But it's so important to start having these conversations, keeping the lines of communication open so that your parents feel comfortable coming to you if they get a suspicious email, if they get a call. Because if they don't feel comfortable coming to you, then They could be giving their money away. You don't know. They're embarrassed now that they have become a victim, and the problem just gets worse and worse. And so they need to feel comfortable having these conversations with you. It's a really good way to protect them as they get older.
And I suppose this goes well beyond just the warnings of scams and whatnot, but just having a better understanding of our parents' finances in general, what accounts, where do they have accounts, and how to access those accounts.
Certainly, it's really important to have these conversations because this is a great way to help protect your parents from all types of financial exploitation and fraud down the road. I know a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, but as we age, we all experience a certain level of cognitive decline. And I'm not talking about dementia or Alzheimer's disease. That is certainly severe cognitive decline. But as we age, we are all going to experience a decline in our ability to manage our finances and make informed financial decisions. And so, if you can start talking to your parents while they are still healthy and relatively young about their finances, get a general idea of where they stand financially, what sort of assets they have, what their sources of income they have, what sources of income they have. Do they have debt? You don't need to know dollars and cents. You don't need to know how much do you have in the bank. You don't need to know how much you owe to Visa on your credit card. But do you have credit card debt? Do you have mortgage debt? Are you still paying off student loans that you took out to pay for my college? Getting a general sense of where they stand financially, opening the door to sharing information, that is going to give you an idea of how they're doing now, so that if things change, you're going to recognize those changes. You're going to notice that maybe mom is having trouble paying the bills because there's a pile of unpaid bills sitting on the kitchen counter, collection notices, and you know that in the past mom's already always been on top of her finances.
Hmm.
If mom is talking about donating money, and she's really getting, loose with the checkbook and writing checks to every organization that asks for money. That's going to be a red flag to you that something has changed, that something is off, and that maybe you need to start getting involved. And so getting a good idea of where they are now financially is going to help you be aware of changes in their financial behavior as they age. And it's important to let your parents know when you're having these conversations, hey, look, I'm looking out for your best interest. I want this information so that if you ever need help from me, I can help you. And I want to know what your plans are, what your wishes are, so that I can follow through on those wishes and make sure that your money is managed in a way that you would want it to be managed if something ever happened to you. So let them know you're looking out for their best interest. You're not trying to pry, you're not trying to be nosy. You don't need all the details, but you need some information. And so these conversations, they don't have to happen, over 5 hours one day. This is this is a series of conversations. Don't grill your parents. That's not going to be fun for them. It's not going to be fun for you. But just opening that door to, having these conversations is really a good idea.
So, as parents age, like, how do we deal with, and maybe it's part of the same conversation, literally. I know that often caretakers sometimes become scammers in a sense. They take advantage of our parents when they're aging, and oh, don't worry, I'll pay I'll handle your bills and pay your bills for you. And as they're siphoning off money to themselves, how can we as children help kind of watch out for that and make sure that's not happening?
I'm glad you brought that up because it is a huge issue. In fact, older adults are more likely to be exploited by someone they know. And that might be a family member, a friend, or a paid giver who is in the house. And so when you're having these conversations with your parents while they are healthy and relatively young, you want to make sure that they have some essential legal documents. You want to make sure they have a will or a trust, something that spells out who gets what when they die. But even more important is to make sure they have a power of attorney. And this should be a general, durable power of attorney so that it remains in effect even if they become mentally incapacitated. And what a power of attorney does is it lets you name someone to make financial decisions for you and financial transactions for you if you can't. And your
Hmm.
parents might be like, well, I'm not ready to give someone that much power right now. And what you can say to them is, hey, you want to do this now while you're in control so that you get to decide who is going to make financial decisions for
Yeah.
you. You want to meet with an estate planning attorney, name your power of attorney. And if it's me, mom and dad, I need to know that you've named me. You don't have to give me the document right now because really, I don't have any power without that document. I can't call up your bank and say, Mom and Dad named me their power of attorney. I need access to their bank account. You have to have the document. So tell them, look, hang on to it. Tell me where you put it and under what circumstances I can access it. That lets them maintain control. And really,
Hmm.
this is all about control. Parents not wanting to give up that control. They also need to have a medical power of attorney, someone who can make medical decisions for them. If they can't, they need a living will. It's also called an advance directive. It spells out what sort of end of life medical care they do or do not want because you don't want to have to decide whether to keep them on life support. That should
Yeah.
be their decision, and it needs to be in writing. It needs to be in writing so the doctors know what their wishes are. It needs to be in writing so family know what the wishes are so they're not in court fighting over whether to keep mom on life support. And
Yeah.
so make sure they have these documents. This is so important. This is the first step to protecting your parents against exploitation as they age. Because if you have been named power of attorney and now mom and dad have dementia, you can go to the bank and say, I am my mom's power of attorney. Then if someone else shows up and comes in with a new power of attorney document because they persuaded mom and dad to name them as power of attorney, they'll be like, well, no, wait, I have their son John on file as the power of attorney. I have their daughter Sally on file as the power of attorney. That's going to, sound off alarm bells for the bank or the financial institution if they've already got that power of attorney on file. If your parents are at home alone with a caregiver, take all of the important financial documents out of the house. Make sure there aren't social security cards lying around. Make sure there
Hmm.
aren't credit cards lying around. Give that caregiver cash to run errands for your parents or a prepaid credit card. These are just some more ways to protect them from being taken advantage of. Make sure you're checking in on your parents. Maybe that means putting a camera in the house. That means calling your parents, visiting your parents. If you don't live in the same town and can't visit them, have a family friend, a neighbor who's checking in because you don't want your parent to be isolated. Because if they're just listening to the voice of one person and that one person is trying to manipulate them, then soon you're going to start calling and the caregiver is going to say, oh, well, mom can't come to the phone right now. They give you the update. You don't know what's really going on. So you've got to stay in communication with your parents, check on them regularly, or have someone else who's checking in on them.
I was that was the question I was going to ask is, what do we do if it's the caretaker who's answering the phone or the caregiver who's answering the phone? And because that definitely is one of the things that scammers do in romance scams is how can I isolate people? How can I keep them away from the people that are going to give them good advice, the people that are going to warn them about things, the people that are just going to ask them questions? How do we know at what point the caregiver has switched over from taking care of them to taking advantage of them?
So if the caregiver is not letting you talk to your parents, or if you are talking to the parent, but the parent is saying things like, I don't think you love me anymore. You don't care about me. My caregiver, Jane, she's the one who's here taking care of me. And so, you know, of course, with dementia, there can be paranoia. And your parent might naturally feel like you have abandoned them if you're not the one caring for them. But if you're hearing statements like, you don't love me, but my caregiver loves me, my caregiver is telling me that, and especially if you hear this, my caregiver is saying, you don't love me,
Yeah.
then yes, that's a big red flag that caregiver is trying to influence your parent. If you need to be monitoring your parents' finances too, you need to be, with that power of attorney, you can use it to access the bank accounts. And so you need to be checking the bank accounts, the credit card accounts, any sort of retirement accounts to make sure that there aren't unusual transactions. If you can't, set up alert transactions on those accounts so you can be notified. Freeze your parents' credit so that
Yeah.
new accounts can't be open in their name. Sign them up for credit monitoring, identity monitoring, so there are alerts if there are changes to their credit report. And I'm gonna throw this out there. It's a shameless plug for Careful, which is the company that I work for. Careful is a monitoring service, an account monitoring service. It also provides credit and identity monitoring, and so you can sign your parents up for the service and link all of their financial accounts. And not only is it going to monitor for those things that banks will particularly monitor for, like a low account balance, but it's going to let you know if there are duplicate payments on purchases, late and missed payments on bills. So if your parent isn't paying bills because the caregiver is stealing money for them, unusually large transactions, you know, income that hasn't been deposited. It's going to look for a whole range of unusual transactions, money mistakes, and then you can get alerts. Your parents can get alerts too, and if your parents are still independent, they can sign up for the service for themselves. And if they want, they can add you as a trusted contact and they can decide what level of access you get. It's view only, but they can decide that maybe you only get to get alerts, account
Hmm.
alerts. You don't get to see everything that's going on.
Yeah, I like the idea of, like, I hadn't thought about the monitoring for duplicate transactions. I think to me, it's like that would be I've talked to other people like accounting fraud, and that's what people will do is like, well, we know there's always this, so we do it twice, and no one notices because that's the transaction we were expecting.
Certainly. And if you have a parent who is starting to experience memory loss, that can be an early sign. They
Yeah.
might not realize that they bought that present for their granddaughter on Amazon yesterday, and now they're buying it again, and they're buying it again, or they're paying bills twice. And, if they're getting alerts that they have already paid this bill, then hopefully that's going to help them realize, oh, wait, I just paid that bill. What's going on? And then, of course, if they've granted you access to get alerts too, then you're going to know that something's going on.
Yeah. Do you have any specific tips for helping people to deal with our parents giving money to people soliciting for donations and whatnot? Because I know that seems to be. I know when my grandparents were aging, that was something that my parents were particularly concerned about, and they had started to give more money to charitable organizations, and it turned out to be legitimate, and that's what they wanted to do. But there was at least that concern of like, well, are these institutions, predatory in the way that they're interacting with them, or was it something that they were voluntarily doing?
I'm glad you asked this because this was a really big issue with my mom. When she was still living on her own after she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, she was writing checks left and right to every organization that asked for money. She was a giving person, but she was giving money to organizations to which she had no ties. All they had to do was send a letter or call her and say, "Hey, will you donate some money?" And she did. And
Hmm.
so here's how I knew this. I would visit her frequently and we would go through her mail. And I would see lots of these requests. And if your parents are getting the requests, that probably means they've already been giving money. They've already gotten on the list. If you see the gifts that charities typically send, maybe it's a calendar, maybe it's a pen,
Yeah.
maybe it's stationery, and it's in the house, that means your parents have been giving money. I also had used my power of attorney to actually, she had not set up online access to her bank account, so I did. And so I was monitoring things from behind the scenes, just keeping an eye on her spending while she was in the early stage of Alzheimer's disease. And I could see that she was writing checks to these organizations. So, how do you get that under control? Have a conversation with your parents. Ask them, what are their giving priorities? What organizations and causes do they care about most? And make a list, and
Hmm.
then create a budget for giving and say, okay, you really want to give money to the Humane Society. So this is how much income you have. I think maybe if you want to give $25 a month or $100 a year. And so you put on the list, Humane Society, $100 a year. And then you encourage them to hang up that list by the phone, on the refrigerator, by their computer, and then they can mark the date when they make that donation so they can keep track of it. And then give them a script. that they can use to say no to anyone else who called. I'm sorry, I have already given to the organizations that are most important to me. I don't have room in my budget to give to you this year. Give them something they can say to politely hang up, because oftentimes older adults don't want to just hang up the phone.
Yeah.
They engage, especially if they're alone, because they enjoy that conversation. And so if you give them that script, they can hang up without feeling bad about doing it. And if it's really getting out of hand, take away the checkbook, take away the credit card, but don't just say, hey, I'm taking away your checkbook. You're
Yeah.
giving away too much money. Say, here's something that I think would be better. Here's a credit card that I think you should use. It's going to be safer, and give them a prepaid credit card so you can limit the damage.
Yeah, I like the idea of not only just listing the charities that they give to, but actually allowing them to put a date next to it so they know, okay, I already gave to them. So even if they forget that they've given to it, they'll look at the list and see that, okay, I did.
Right.
There's definitely times that I've given to a charity and forgot, well, was that this year that I gave it or was it last year? And having that right in front of my face would be helpful.
Right. You need an Excel spreadsheet that you've got on your computer that you can refer to anytime you get a call.
Yep. Um, any recommendations on helping uh, our parents not fall for like the gift card scams?
Oh gosh, I think certainly letting them know that if they get a call and someone asks them to pay by gift card, that this is a scam. This is a telltale sign of a scam. But I think even a better approach is to tell your parents, don't answer the phone.
Yeah.
Just don't answer the phone. Let all calls go to voicemail, and then you can listen to your voicemail and decide, hey, should I return this call? And if it's a call that's supposedly from the bank or from Social Security Administration or whatever, call those agencies directly. Do not call the number that the person has given you. And so that's, I mean, really, that's the best way. Don't answer the phone. And usually if it's a scammer, they're not even going to leave a
Yeah.
message.
Yeah. Most of them
So
don't.
most of them don't. And the thing is, they might think, oh, I recognize this number. This is from my local area code. Let them know scammers can spoof numbers. They have technology that makes it look like it's a number that you might even recognize. And so don't be fooled by that. Just let the call go to voicemail, and again, write a note for them. If they are starting to experience any sort of memory loss, put that note, hang it up on the kitchen cabinets, on the refrigerator, by the phone so that they don't forget. Don't answer the phone.
And I know, from a technology perspective, while it's not great in all circumstances, maybe even setting up the device to uh, unknown caller IDs go straight to voicemail, like their cell phones won't even ring, but only people within their contacts list will actually ring through to them.
And that's certainly a great idea.
I, any suggestions on, I've started to get these really random text messages from people. Hey, this is Susie. Um, Wanted to see if you wanted to meet me at the store. I don't know, I don't know, Susie, and the first time I got one of those, I was like, "Oh, you've got the wrong number," and the person was way overly apologetic. "Oh, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I didn't mean to disturb you. It will never like. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine. Like I was, they were so apologetic that I was like, okay, this is already suspicious, and okay, whatever. And then like a day later, I got another one, and then I've probably been getting several a day now of hey Bob, let's go. Do you want to go golf today? I'm like, okay, this is prior to a month ago, I'd get a wrong text message once a year or something like that. Um, any suggestions on handling kind of those unknown things that are outside of the norm, like starting to get text messages from people that they don't know, and kind of like you were saying earlier with the donations, they're kind of sometimes they can be kind of lonely and want to talk with people. They grew up in an era where being polite was maybe more valued than it is today,
Mhm.
and so they feel like they want to engage or at least be polite and talk to the person or something like that. Any suggestions on dealing with those sort of things?
Again, you need to warn your parents that there are scammers out there who will use all sorts of methods to get to them, including sending text messages
Yeah.
and pretending to, you know, know them and saying, "Hey, you want to get together?" and let them know, if it's not a name that you recognize, don't respond. You don't have to respond. It's likely a scammer trying to draw you into a conversation, and it's going to get to a point where they're trying to get something out of you. Same goes for social media.
Yeah.
If someone you don't know responds to a post that you've made and says something like, "Oh, that's such a great picture of you. You are such an attractive woman. I've been looking for someone like you." Let them know. Don't respond to people who reach out to you out of the blue, because they are likely scammers. They're not looking for love. They're looking to take advantage of you. Don't open the door
Yeah.
to someone you don't know. If it's someone claiming that they're in the neighborhood and they're sealing driveways, or they're, trimming bushes or whatever, don't answer the door. Just don't answer the door. Let them keep on walking. That's the safest way. It's just like, don't answer the phone. Don't respond to the text message. Don't engage with people you don't know on social media. Don't open the door. That's the best way to stay safe. Now, if you have a parent who has dementia, of course, telling them these things isn't always going to do any good, because they're likely going to forget. Put those reminder notes up again throughout
Hmm.
the house so that they remember, because this is something that people with dementia will do for themselves. If you have a parent with dementia but they haven't been diagnosed yet, one of the early signs is reminder notes around the house, reminding them of how to do things that seem really pretty obvious. And so that's a sign that they are forgetting things. Put notes up for them. But once it gets to the point where they really can't be trusted to be on their own, you've got to get either someone in the house, a family member, a neighbor, a volunteer from their place of worship, a paid caregiver, keeping an eye on them all the time, because it will get to the point where they, even if there's a note on the door, they're still going to answer the door. They might walk out the door and they might not come back, but you've
Yeah.
got to have someone who's keeping an eye on your loved one at all times once that dementia progresses. And this is what happened with my mom. She, I thought she was still okay to be living on her own. I had taken away the car keys, but I had people who were coming in to take her on errands and keep her company. But one day she had gotten a call while she was alone from someone telling her that she had won a sweepstakes
Mm.
and she needed to wire money to claim her prize. And she'd actually called my uncle asking how to do this, how to wire money. He calls me and says, "I just got a call from your mom. She wants to know how to wire money." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I went right over to her house. Of course, the person is calling, and I pick up the phone and I'm like, "Stop calling." And I had to stay there because my mom was convinced that she had won this prize and she had to wire money because her financial decision making ability had been impacted by Alzheimer's disease. And
Mm.
it didn't matter how much I tried to reason with her. There was no reasoning with her. And I had to sit with her all day and then call a friend to come sit with her when I had to go pick up my kids, to make sure that she wasn't going to get on the phone with this guy who was trying to scam her. And that was a wake up call for me. I realized she couldn't be at home alone anymore. And so at that point, I moved her in with me. So there does come a point when your loved one with dementia can no longer be trusted to be alone for their own physical safety and their financial safety.
Yeah, that's I think that's a very hard transition for both sides of the equation to realize that our parents can't be trusted to make decisions on their own.
Right. But it's so important, because if you love your parents, you have to protect them. And that means having these hard conversations and making these hard decisions, and going back to having these conversations. If you're having conversations with them while they're healthy and relatively young, then you can ask them about these situations. At what point would you be willing to perhaps move into a assisted living facility? At what point would you be willing to move in with me, or allow us to hire caregivers for you? And then that's them telling you what their wishes are, so that you're not making that decision for them.
Yeah, but and to me, I think it's funny that even if these are situations, these are conversations we should be having with our spouses
Yes.
now while we're young. I mean, one of the things that I did was made uh, a file folder that I keep at the bank safe at the bank safe deposit box that has key accounts. Here's the account numbers. Here's what's in these accounts. Here's how to get into them. Here's how to move the money around. Not that we don't talk about those things on a regular basis, but just having it documented somewhere that's safe and secure, that she knows, okay, I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to wake up in the middle of the night and worry about this. I know there's this document out here that has all this stuff in it. And
It's a
I've
great idea.
and I've definitely heard of. I really like the idea of the oh gosh, the medical directives, because I've heard so many people that when mom or dad gets sick, one kid is like, well, no, we need to do whatever we can. And one of the other kids is like, well, no, this is what mom wanted, but there's no document. There's no one's had these conversations, or the conversation was only with one person. And so it just really makes those kind of things challenging if there's no documentation.
Right. And I think that is an easy way to get information that you need from your parents is to ask them to write it down. If they don't want to tell you details about their finances, they can put everything in writing, put it someplace safe like you did. Maybe it's a safe deposit box, maybe it's a home safe, or a filing cabinet in the house with a lock on it, but you need to know how to access it
Yes.
in case of emergency. It's not going to do anyone any good if no one can access it. So tell your parents to put it in writing, put it someplace safe, tell you how to access it and when you can access it.
Yeah, there's no point in having a safe deposit box if your spouse doesn't know where the key is and that it even exists.
Exactly.
So, on your sites, do you have any additional resources that people can get if they have questions or want to know more?
I do. At CameronHuddleston.com, I actually have an in case of emergency organizer that you can download, print out, give to your parents, use for yourself. I have a scam red flag sheet that you can print out and give to your parents, or just, kind of leave it on the kitchen counter. Here's something for you to think about. Email it to them, just as a reminder of what to be looking out for. And then I do have some articles on my CameronHuddleston.com site, and there are a lot of resources at getcareful.com, and careful has two L's. Lots of resources there on if you're an older adult, how to protect yourself and your finances, and if you are a caregiver for a parent, how you can protect your parents' finances.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link all of those in the show notes. If people want to find you on social media, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Cameron K. Huddleston. And you can also follow Careful at Get Careful on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.